Hi there, welcome to Education Café Canada. My name is Shari and I am a retired special education teacher and guidance counselor. On this channel, we talk about learning strategies, career coaching, and easing into retirement. So on today's menu, well, we're going to talk about attention deficit disorder, but probably not the way that you may have read about it or heard about it before, because this is going to be from my perspective as a 20-plus year special education teacher and as somebody who has ADHD. Because what I saw in my classroom wasn't always what I was reading in articles or learning about in professional development. So I would like to talk to you about what I was seeing in the classroom, what would make my students struggle, maybe what would make them shine, and maybe along the way you're going to see some traits you find in yourself. Okay, so first I'm just going to talk quickly about some clinical stuff that everybody pretty much agrees on. And that is that attention deficit hyper disorder, or ADHD, is considered to be a neurodivergence. And in pretty simple terms, really what that means is that we learn differently. Our brains are wired differently. It doesn't mean it's good, it doesn't mean it's bad, it's just different. And different can sometimes be great, really. So what we're always told is that ADHD means that people have trouble focusing, that they're impulsive, or they're hyperactive. And we were also told as teachers that boys are more often diagnosed than girls are. But really the reason for this seems to be a lot more to do with society and our mores than it is to do with the distribution of ADHD. You know, historically, boys were allowed to be active. They were supposed to be outspoken, and girls were supposed to sit quietly. And even as we move into this century and this era, this isn't always changing. So, when boys would be hyperactive, it was always noticed. But if girls were showing inattention, they would be considered shy, or that they're daydreaming, or maybe that there was a slight learning challenge. And this is the reason why ADHD would often get misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all. Okay, and this is really important because ADHD is not something we outgrow. It changes as we get older, but we don't outgrow it. So if it's not diagnosed, it's going to grow with you. So, as I mentioned, the symptoms that we see over time: inattention, impulse control challenges, and of course, motor hyperactivity. And hyperactivity and impulsivity can lessen as we get older, but the inattention, or what they consider to be the lack of focus, that will continue generally into adulthood. But the symptoms can become less obvious because as we get older, we learn to mask them. We learn to adapt. We learn to comply with what society expects of us. So although outwardly it may appear as though it has gone away or is going away, inside we reframe how we look at their inattention or our inattention. If people with ADHD truly were inattentive, how is it that if something actually engaged them, they become hyper-focused? And you see this if you've ever seen somebody who has ADHD and they're doing something that really interests them. I mean, I had a boss who used to say that he thought bombs could go off around me if I was in the quote zone and I wouldn't even notice. So now you can start thinking that maybe it's not the inability to focus, but the fact that there's a lack of stimulation and these people are bored. So contrary to what some people think, it is not that people with ADHD have slower brains. It is in fact that they have very fast brains. Very fast. So think about a classroom and the teacher is talking at a regular pace, repeating information because, you know, if you don't hear it 3 times or 6 times, you won't remember it. And what is happening to the person with ADHD is that the information is coming through too slowly. So consequently, they're understimulated and they start to look around the classroom. They start noticing things. They call out about things. They become active. They fidget in their seats. Well, you can imagine all that energy is going somewhere and it's not focusing on what the teacher is saying. In short, it's not fidgets per se that are making this child focus, or that I guess, an adult focus. What it is you have given them a second mindless thing that they can do that is taking up part of their brain, and therefore they're no longer understimulated. So now you can start thinking that maybe it's not the inability to focus, but the fact that there's a lack of stimulation and these people are bored. And something that I do want to stress is that when a person has ADHD, it does not mean they cannot be successful in school. I have heard this so many times and read it, and I don't know where that comes from. As a personal experience, I have several degrees. I think I have 5 degrees. I have 3 certificates. Just because things interest me and I take a course and another course and another course. It's not that I'm like some brilliant person. I don't think I'm any more brilliant than anyone else. But that is the way that my mind works. And I had a lot of different hobbies when I was younger. And so although I was not an Olympic level archer, I could do a lot of different things, and that's how I would exhaust myself. So I want you to know that this is typical of somebody who has ADHD and not an exception. So please know your child has every possibility of going on to post-secondary if they so desire. They may choose to do a trade. I mean, trades are great because they use your mind, they use your body as well, whatever it is they choose to do, but they are not, quote, broken. There's nothing wrong with them. They are just wired differently. Medication is not an easy decision because there are a lot of things to take in mind. First of all, you need to keep adjusting the medication as your child is aging and growing. And we know children can have growth spurts. So when you are driving to the mall or to the store to look at buying some new clothes because your kid has grown, put that reminder in your mind to also call your doctor so you can see whether or not the dosage is still correct. Okay, and that's important. A second one that's also important is side effects can vary. For a number of students, the medication is fine. They take it, they can focus better, they do better in school, and everyone's happy, well, possibly until there's a growth spurt or what have you. But there are many students who have side effects. I mean, I had a student who didn't want to take her medication because it made her violent. If you are seeing side effects, hopefully not as bad as violence, but if you're seeing side effects in your child, go back and talk to your doctor. It's not like in the old days when Ritalin was the only option. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with Ritalin. So I've worked very well for many of my students, but there are a number of other medications that are out there. So please know you don't have to take what's given. You can actually see what's happening and then decide what you're going to do. As I gave you some warnings about drugs, now I'm going to give you some warnings about not using drugs. And the first is students I found who did not take medication or were not prescribed medication, sometimes, somewhat often, depending on the school population, sometimes they would go for street drugs instead to self-medicate. So that is something that you're going to want to keep on top of if you're choosing not to go the medication route. Not every child is going to do it. I don't want to scare you, but I do want you to be aware of that possibility so you can counteract it. And as I said, I was never medicated because we didn't use that. We didn't have medications back then. I wasn't diagnosed back then, and I will say I never turned to street drugs to control my ADHD. I just did lots of things to exhaust myself so I could sleep. But we'll talk about that in a future video. All the more reason now to subscribe or give me a thumbs up. So please know that on the medication front, there is no right or wrong choice. So no judgment, all right? You have to decide what works best for your family, your child, yourself, in order to determine whether or not you want to go that route. Now, having talked about both those options, I do want to mention some natural supports that can lessen symptoms. They don't always lessen symptoms. They certainly aren't a cure. But some people have had success with this. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is oranges. Eating them, having orange juice, or even the scent of orange. For some people, it reduces or calms down some of the ADHD symptoms. Now, there are other scents. In my classroom, I always had some vanilla essence because vanilla has also been found to be calming, as has lavender. And you think about it, some of those like posh hotels will spray lavender on your pillowcase before you go to sleep. So you can imagine it has a calming effect. And one thing I should mention also is about diet. And with that, I say herbicides and pesticides can increase symptoms of ADHD. If you can get organic vegetables or fruits, that would be wonderful. If you can't afford them, which, they're expensive, try really washing well and getting a really good wash for your fruits and vegetables. Something that I found worked for me was chamomile tea. If I found that my brain was racing before bed, I would stop maybe an hour before bed, have a nice cup of chamomile tea. I would, sit and relax. Certainly no devices on. I mean, we know even if you don't have ADHD, that devices an hour or 2 hours before bed can keep the brain racing. So please, definitely look at doing that. Because sleep is really important. It's important because it solidifies knowledge. What you learn during the day, and that goes all the way through adulthood. Okay, those brain cells are all interconnecting while you're sleeping. And if you're not getting enough sleep or you're not getting a deep sleep, well, those connections can't solidly form. So, that alone is a good reason to make sure that your child is getting a lot of sleep. Okay, so what you want to do is look for things that your child is interested in. Maybe it's Tai Chi, maybe it's dance, playing a musical instrument, perhaps it's archery or some other sport. Whatever it is that interests them, try and get them involved on a regular basis. Now, I don't want you to go spending a ton of money. If you have it, that's great, but most of us don't. So don't go spending a ton of money on different sports and so on and so forth. Find out what's really interesting and intriguing them. See if you can get, through the school programs, courses, or if there's some government program that you can latch onto that will help pay for it. But you will start to see your child's focus moving or improving in other areas, slowing them down. Because certainly with my student who was an archer, archery is not something you do quickly. You have to focus, you have to, align things up and so on and so forth. And that was all helping him to slow down. And when his brain was no longer overstimulated, that was when he could focus better in class. So it's just something that you might want to consider. And I do want to stress that having ADHD does not mean your child can't go to university or can't go to college. It is true there are a lot of people with ADHD who are in the entertainment industry. You look at Howie Mandel, Ty Pennington, his name escaped me for a second, and so on and so forth, because we're very hyper. And that's today's food for thought. If you found this useful, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing. And if you want to support us financially, you can click on that little coffee cup and buy us a coffee.